and welcome to Subject to Interpretation, a podcast which takes us deep into the topics that matter to professional interpreters. I'm your host, Maria Ceballo-Wallis. Today, we're going to explore a timely and critical topic, the future of interpreter training. Joining me are two of my favorite people who bring invaluable leadership and expertise to this discussion. First off, we have Claudia Eslava. She's a director of operations at Mora Institute of Interpretation. She oversees the key initiatives at the Institute, ensuring that interpreters have access to high-quality professional training and resources. Welcome, Claudia.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having us. I'm so excited for this episode.
Also with us is Agustin de la Mora, founder and president of Mora Institute of Interpretation, a leading institution in interpreter education and professional development. Now, Agustin has been instrumental in shaping training programs for interpreters across the country for many, many years. Welcome, Agustin.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for having me. Hello, Claudia. Happy to be here.
Well, I'm really happy to have you both here. So let's start with a little bit of the boring stuff. Statistics. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the number of interpreter jobs in the United States, at least, as of 2023, were approximately 78,300 for interpreters and translators. Now, the median annual salary for these is around 57,000. This was as of May of 2023. The average salary being 63,000 and the upper 25% being 76,000 and above. So this is just to set us up a little bit into why interpretation may be of interest to folks who are out there who are wondering whether or not it truly is a career for them. Again, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, interpretation and translation services or jobs in that area will be growing at least 2% this year. Let's talk about what it takes to become an interpreter. Claudia, you run the show at Mora Institute. So talk to us about what it takes to train interpreters.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for bringing up those statistics. I think something that we struggle still, even as a company, as an organization, and that the Interpreters Association struggle with is outreach. Like, we really want to get the younger generation excited about interpretation as a possible career choice for them. I know that a lot of them still don't think that this is a viable career or even know that it exist as a career choice. We have a lot of bilingual youth that should really be jumping on this. This is a fantastic opportunity, especially because there's a lot of remote work available. So if you just happen to find this episode on a YouTube journey, please save that little piece of information. It is key. You can do a lot of remote work with this. You can work from home. There's a lot of opportunity in this field right now, and we need interpreters, as Maria just stated.
Agustin, you have been in this field for many years, not just as an interpreter, but as a trainer. How have your training programs evolved over the past few years? Claudia just told us about how the work of the interpreter has evolved with now new remote possibilities. How about the training?
Well, the training has evolved as well. I have to tell you, when I started in the interpretation field in the courts, which is where I started 37, 38 years ago, the training was very easy to understand. There was no training. Interpreters were basically left to their own devices. Most interpreters already working in courts were hired because they were bilingual. And I tend to joke when I teach classes that the test that used to be the test for interpreters was, do you speak Chinese? Yeah. Can you be here tomorrow? Yeah. You're in. That was it. That was the training. So people had no idea what is it that they were supposed to do. I remember the first time I worked in a court system, I didn't even know where to stand. So from there to now, there's been leaps and bounds in the progress of training interpreters. First of all, the existence of training. In the courts many years ago and in the hospitals, training was sporadic, mostly in person. And us as an institution, we had already seen the future of training remotely. And we had started doing classes online because we realized the market was small. Many people were already interpreters, but they thought they didn't need any training. Their bosses didn't think they needed any training. So sometimes we could have a group of 3 people here, 2 people there, and we realized, well, if we do it online, we can get them together. And funny enough, we were quite prepared. So when the pandemic hit, training remotely online became kind of the norm. And now everybody's doing it, as they say. So it has changed from no training to some in-person training to a lot of training being done online. And that's what we have been doing now for many years. Even way before the pandemic, we already had online classes. So that's a big change.
Yes, I would like to add to what Agustin just mentioned, which is 99% of our training now as Stella Mora Institute happens online. And whenever I talk about what makes our school different, what makes us special, it's specifically our methodology, our approach to training, which was created by Agustin. I wish that in an ideal world, interpreters could go to a bachelor program and graduate with a bachelor program. That would actually be the best path forward. However, we're still in a very interesting place when it comes to interpreters and how interpreters become certified. They may not always have the resources to go to a bachelor program. So what makes our school different than anyone else is Agustin's approach towards a very practical type of education. Through what we call the weightlifting method, we're really teaching our interpreters how to improve their interpreter skills through a very specific methodology that's simple to follow, but that is very effective. We're really, really proud of that. We have sort of taken ownership of that and we have ran with it. So practicality is really at the core of everything we do. Because interpreters don't have a whole lot of time, so we're doing the best that we can with the time that they do have available, and we want to be able to provide them with as many resources as possible without a whole lot of the fluff. This is still a situation in which interpreters can learn a lot once they do get started, but before they actually get started working in the courts or in the hospitals, they do need a certification. So what we try to do here is, okay, let's sort of put together what's important, the meat and potatoes of your training in order to get you certified first. That's what we try to focus on the most. And we've continued that tradition, which was started by Agustin, and we've carried it out throughout all of the offerings that we have at the online school and how we think about training in general. And that's sort of our methodology to everything. Is it practical? Is the interpreter learning what they need to in order to help them achieve their goals? That's what we try to focus on the most.
Now, Claudia, we've focused a little bit on new interpreters, and we're going to talk a little bit later about some of your specific programs. But I think it's fair to say that the De La Mora Institute provides training and opportunity for growth and continuing education to all levels of interpreters. As in terms of the code of ethics for interpretation in pretty much every domain allows and encourages interpreters to essentially never stop learning. That's the motto of our podcast, Subject to Interpretation. So let's just have a quick overview, you or Agustin, about some of the different opportunities that different levels of interpreters can have, including the membership program, right?
Of course, about 60, so over half, definitely over half. I want to say about 60% of our students are already certified students. So they're part of the community, they're out there, they're working professional interpreters. So a lot of our classes and a lot of the offerings that we have on our website are catered specifically to them, of course. Like you mentioned, the membership is an important way for us to be able to provide them with the continued education credits that they need, and to provide them with education and perspectives from instructors from all over the country. We also try, whenever we're thinking about what kind of classes we want to offer for the year, who has been popular in the field, who is providing interesting perspectives, who had popular presentations at recent conferences. We do think about all of these things. We reach out to a lot of instructors who are aware of Agustin's teaching methodology as well. So it's all sort of becomes this cohesive team of instructors that are all over the country, who have a lot of different perspectives, but that all understand and agree that interpreter training that does need to have a certain amount of practicality to it, because it's just the world that we live in. So that's what we try to offer, the kind of continuing education that we try to offer to our certified interpreters. And they're fantastic to work with. I mean, we love being able to cater a lot of training options for them. We have that. We our more advanced interpreters are also usually training or studying to become federally certified. So we're often on that journey with them as well, trying to provide them as many resources as possible. Right now, we have self-paced federal interpreter training classes, as well as live options for both the written and the oral exam that they can go and enroll and to be a part of. We are on a mission to create community with those interpreters. We want to hear from them, since they are the ones working. They're really the ones that know what trends are happening at work. They're really the ones that are able to provide us with the most feedback on what they need to train on next, what their bosses are asking them to do, what's sort of new in the field in general. We hear back from our working interpreters. So we try to provide them, again, as many classes as possible, as well as many feedback sessions as possible, so we're learning from them as well. So that way it creates, again, this sort of cyclical community in which we're learning from each other constantly.
Agustin, you in addition to being the founder and president of the La Mora Institute, you're also a working interpreter.
That's correct. I just wanted to backtrack a little bit, and one of the things that our school introduced as I think a distinctive way of teaching interpreters was to change the idea that to become an interpreter on any field, medical, legal, educational, which is kind of the surging new trend in interpretation, was the acquisition of vocabulary. So we noticed at the beginning of training 20, 30 years ago, the idea, well, we'll teach you all these words. How do you say judge, and how do you say femur, and how do you say teacher? And we realized that vocabulary acquisition certainly is part of being an interpreter, but not necessarily the most important part. The most important part, because interpreters were hired without any training, was to learn interpreting techniques and to put them together in a cohesive, systematic approach that is very pragmatic, so people can have results. And then the acquisition of all the ancillary words that they need, all the ancillary specific areas that they need to know about, but always being able to integrate in what they learn with us as far as interpreting in any field. Now, you say I'm a working interpreter. Yes, I am. I still want to keep up my skill. I mostly do federal cases. Literally, I've done very few civil cases in federal court. I mostly do criminal cases, but I make it a point to be available for the courts, because I think that a good part of what we do is to show people that we can walk the talk.
Now, let's talk a little bit about something you've mentioned, which is certification, preparing interpreters for different levels of certification. First of all, I think that by you continuing to be a a working interpreter, it keeps you in touch with what other people are doing out there and what, I guess, the types of challenges that interpreters are facing when they actually do get to work. But prior to that, I'm sure that, Claudia has probably, she hears what's happening behind the scenes from all the interpreters and the students who are taking the courses, trying to pass the tests and trying to get to that next level. Let's talk about specifically training for that, for the certification. Let's talk about the challenges that you find in not just training, but having interpreters acquiring the skills, the exact skills they need to pass these tests.
Fantastic question, because interpreter misconceptions are many, but they're also very common. We hear the same things over and over when it comes to the certification tests, both the medical and the legal. They tend to be the same sort of complaints. And I would actually like to mention that the Institute in particular were in this very interesting position in which we've been around for the past 25 years. And we also provide rating services to various states around this country. That means that we get to see the journey of the interpreters as they train towards taking the certification exams. And that means we also have a glimpse into what the test results are. Last year, towards the end of last year, we've decided to do an exam symposium, which was a presentation, basically, which we did for about 30 different language access programs and state governments in the country. And we had this wonderful opportunity to present to them and speak with them because we took the initiative to create this little report, which we thought was important, to look at a snapshot of the test results in the past 2 years and analyze what the results meant. And through this process and through this presentation, we were also able to address a lot of the misconceptions that we hear from interpreters over and over and over again. So through this exam symposium, we found a few interesting things, which also addresses what Agustin just mentioned a moment ago about our specific approach to vocabulary building. So one of the common misconceptions is that well, first of all, let me talk about passing rates. The average passing rates from this pool of tests that we analyzed in the past 2 years, the average passing rate was 10%. It is a very low passing rate, especially for first-time test takers. And there's multiple reasons for that. Number one, we wanted to address the question, is the test valid? And very quickly, and not to get in a whole lot of detail, the answer is yes. The test was carefully looked at for many years. It wasn't an overnight test. And the most interesting part about the test is that it measures interpreting performance. Okay.
Right.
So what does that mean for interpreters? What does that tell them? What that tells them is that it isn't particularly based on this heavy terminology. So what I hear all the time whenever I'm speaking with a brand new interpreter, or maybe an interpreter who has taken the test once, and they'll call and they're like, well, I definitely need to study. I want to prepare because when I took the test, it was these few legalese words that I had no idea how to say in the other language. And that's the reason I failed. That's probably one of the most comments that I get when I'm on the phone speaking with interpreters. They think they failed the exam because of legalese, Through the analyzing of these tests, we have found that that's just simply not the case. There aren't even enough legalese terms within the actual test itself to cause you to fail the exam, meaning you could miss every single legalese word and you could still pass the exam. Actually, one of the most interesting reasons why interpreters are failing the test is due to omissions. They're not saying the words. So it's not even a question of whether it was the term, did I say the right term or not? It's half of them, they're not being said at all. So the majority of failures are due to omissions. And what that tells us is that that's a very simple skill, interpreter skill, that can be addressed through training. We're talking about note taking, we're talking about memory skills, we're talking about cognitive abilities that interpreters can actually work on with the right kind of training. And I'm going to say the right kind of training because if you go into a very heavy terminology sort of type of school methodology in which you're learning only terminology, you're not addressing those interpreting skills. You're not addressing memory. You're not addressing very specific cognitive abilities that will help you perform better under that type of pressure. So we know from analyzing these tests that interpreters are just simply not saying words. They're skipping them, they're missing them, they're omitting them altogether. So we have to focus heavily, or if you're studying for the test now you know that what you should be doing is focus on interpreting skills. The language skills part of it, you should already have. You should already know that you have a strong language skills for both languages. Okay, that should be a secondary worry. Your initial worry should really be, okay, let me work on my interpreting skills.
Well, let me interrupt you here for a second because you did bring it up. How is a person to know that they have the language skills necessary? I know that Agustin defines fluency in terms of whether or not you can get your point across for the situation that you are involved in. So a 5-year-old can be fluent in English, Spanish, German, for the purposes of being able to get their parents' attention and get food and other things. But that fluency, does not translate into going into a business environment. So let's ask Agustin if you can at least talk a little bit about that. How do we ensure that candidates are well placed to begin with and don't all of a sudden find out that their heritage, Spanish, French, German, is just not sufficient to become an interpreter?
That's a really good point, and I'm glad you brought it up because when we talk about being bilingual, the question is, how bilingual are you? And when we talk about the required ability, we say that an interpreter should have the level of sophistication in the two languages they're going to interpret that should be equivalent to about a 2-year college degree. Not necessarily that they have the college degree, but they have that level of sophistication in the language. Because you said it correctly. I mean, a 10-year-old child, native of whatever language, they're fluent native speakers of the language. But in their own native fluent speaking language, they could go to a hospital to accompany their mother for a consultation and understand about half of what the doctor said. That doesn't make them less fluent in their native language or less knowledgeable of the language or less native, but they don't have then the skill required in grammatical skills, syntaxes, and vocabulary, of course, right? So the idea that any bilingual person can be an interpreter is equivalent to saying any person who can drive a car can also drive in a Formula One car. So one of the things that is important to understand is sometimes people are very sophisticated, have a high level of fluency and grammatical skills and vocabulary in one language, but not the other. And you say, how do we resolve that? Well, many states, if we talk about courts and some hospitals too, are starting to test the level of sophistication of the language before they actually tell people you're ready to take an interpreting exam, because it's a prerequisite. And it is not enough to be fluent or to be bilingual. We need to know, do you possess the level of sophistication in both languages that you're going to interpret to actually effectively transfer the information from one into the other, because you might understand it perfectly in one language and not have the ability to say it in the other language because you're deficient in that language. And that can be done by testing. I mean, there are The ACTFL gives you a pretty good idea of the level of sophistication that a person has in both languages. And most hospitals that are serious about this, and most court systems, require a level of sophistication equivalent to what they call superior or superior plus, I think, to have the appropriate level of language. So then we can transmit the knowledge about skill that Claudia mentioned. And then when you put them together, then you have a successful individual.
And I would like to add that if you're an interpreter who is wondering if am I fluent enough, that is actually a test that you can Google and find on your own and test and take on your own. They're generally not that expensive, and it's called an OPI. So you can sort of Google OPI test and find a company who does it, and then you'll receive a pretty quick feedback on where you are in terms of language skills.
So Claudia, we've talked about the omissions in your analysis, and we've also talked about how important it is to actually come into the process with at the very least, a superior or a high enough level that will make it possible for that person to interpret into both languages. What other conclusions did your analysis find?
Yes, so through the exam symposium process, I would just like to reiterate the two most important conclusions, which is one, people are failing because they actually just simply don't have the language skills. It's kind of two sides. There's a two-side answer to the same coin, if you will. So that's really the number one. They don't have the language skills, therefore they never even had a chance to begin with. But then the other set of students are failing simply due to their lack of interpreter skills. So that's where our school can sort of come in and help them train those interpreting skills so they have a much better shot at passing that certification test. Which brings me to, we have the longest program that we've ever done. It's our longest and most complete program yet. We're calling it the 100-hour interpreter program that is starting on May 31st. You can go on our website and find out a little bit more about it, but it sort of puts together everything that we just talked about now, which is we will be testing students for their OPI, so everybody will have a very clear understanding of where they are regarding their language skills. And then, of course, we're spending the rest of that time, the 100 hours, in helping them improve their interpreting skills in particular. So that way, when they go into that test, they feel much more confident, they feel ready to take on that test, and they feel like, okay, I can do this, because they have a much better understanding of where they are in terms of both language and interpreting skills. So please go on our website, find out more about it. It's starting on May 31st. We're very proud of it, and we're excited to make it a yearly program. So come and join the first year.
Yes, if I may, I want to add to that the fact that in the United States, when I came from Mexico, I discovered, man, everybody has certification. They have certified masseuses. You have a license to be a hairdresser or a nail technician or to fix your automobile. They say, well, this is an ASA certified mechanic, right? So it was clear in the culture that in order to do a professional job that had specific implications for a person, let alone professions like attorney or doctor, you needed training. You needed to go to school. You needed to pass some tests. And here I go to the courts, and they literally hired me because A, I was bilingual, B, I had done one deposition, and 3, I used to teach languages at the Berlin School of Languages. And that was the qualification. So it's not a surprise that people have a bad result in their test if they come like I did, thinking, oh, okay, so no training. This is the only thing in the States that doesn't need any training or any schooling. And obviously, when the test came about, it was surprising to both the courts, the hospitals, and by the way, to the hospitals, not only surprising, it was costly because they faced very severe penalties or whatever you want to call it for having to settle lawsuits because of bad interpretation. But really, it was because of that, because we were ignoring the fact that if you're going to affect a person's life with your professional actions, you should be trained and you should be credentialed. And I had a judge that asked me a question some years ago when I was teaching in Nevada. And he said, well, Augustine, I understand what you're saying, that yes, a lot of mistakes can be made by people who don't know what they're doing. That's clear to me. But I, as a judge, cannot evaluate their Vietnamese skills or their Arabic skills or their Russian skills because I don't speak any of those languages. And it gave me the opportunity to tell him, well, listen, Judge, if you go to the dentist, you don't have any knowledge of dentistry, right? But how do you know that the dentist is a dentist? He goes, well, they have their diploma right there in the office. Exactly, they are credentialed. So, and most people, in all those people that have credentials, they got them by going to school first. And that's why we decided to extend this program to 100 hours because Claudia just mentioned it. If I were the king of the world, we would have a whole bunch of degrees in interpretation, even a bachelor's degree on general interpretation, and maybe even specializations in legal, medical, educational, which is now the new emerging trend that schools are saying, oh, so it's not enough that I ask, the secretary who happens to speak Creole, let's ask her to be the interpreter in a very important IEP session where the future of this child's education has to be decided, even though she has never been told what interpreting is. So we decided 100 hours would be better. One of these days, we'll probably have a bachelor's degree if we continue with this trend.
That's right. I want to remind, but when we did this symposium again last year, we also sent the results to a few of our friends, professionals that have been doing this forever. And I got the chance to speak with Robert Jolie, who I believe we have interviewed in this podcast before. So look up that episode. But he mentioned something fantastic, which he talks about often, which is interpreting is a profession. And everybody needs to remember that, including brand new interpreters that are coming in to become certified. It is a profession. So therefore, that means that it requires study. It requires time. It requires effort in order for it to be done well. The part of the reason why those passing rates are so low is because we know the majority of the students never took a class or a lesson before taking a test. So it's not only the language skills, like we talked about, the interpreting skills, it's the need for interpreters to understand, no, this is a profession. It takes time and practice to be done well and to be successful in that test. And for the rest of your career as an interpreter, you're always going to need to study. Always.
Now, I find it extremely interesting that despite the fact that technology is even allowing us to have this podcast over Zoom, the very basic requirements, the basic actions that make up interpretation are and will always be the same. They are actual voice-to-voice communication, and the only way to be able to interpret is to actually put in the hours and put in the work to learn the language, and to put in the hours and put in the work to learn the skills that you need so that you can do 10 things at once, which is probably what interpreters do. Take notes, listen, talk, pay attention to visual cues, audio cues, et cetera, and to do this on a sustained level, on a high enough level so that the accuracy is maintained. So having said all of this, what's the role of technology in helping us be better learners, in being more in helping us learn in a more practical way without taking us away from the basics, which we know is the bottom line is we got to do the work.
Yep.
There's a lot of ways in which tech aids education. Our promise as the Institute to all of our students is that we'll always be working hard on our end to make sure that we're providing cutting edge educational tools in order to help us along to become better interpreters, to make sure that everybody is, that all of our students are learning technology in general, because it's obviously the future. Future interpreters will need to work with technology, so it needs to start on the educational level, right? So that's sort of our promise to everybody. We want to make sure that we're providing them with interesting tools to go along their learning journey. But there's lots of things. There's so many different ways in which interpreters can even, without, let's say, coming to our school, can go and let their curiosity lead them and find ways to use the free technology that's available now to help them create interpreting material even. Of course, there's a lot of heavy talk about AI, but one of the really interesting ways in which it can be used is to get training materials from AI. Of course, after you know what you're doing in terms of practice, if you know how to practice as an interpreter, which we can teach you the ways, then you can certainly start exploring on your own and be interested and be aware of everything that exists out there. But I love interpreters who have, at conferences, actually last year, we had one interpreter come to our table and told us that they had been using ChatGPT and other AIs to help them come up with interpreting material. And they showed us, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is what it's coming up with. It's helped on my daily practice. I'm like, wonderful. That is a fantastic use of technology, that's there and readily available for us. So start getting creative with it. Don't be afraid, because ultimately this is about education and increasing your interpreting skills. So go out and explore. Again, the future is tech, the future is AI. So it's important for you to stay curious and to find ways to use the tech to sort of include that in your own personal training. But as an institution, we are also very heavily looking into how gamification helps interpreters learn. And there's more, I'm going to leave that at a ... because we have more announcements coming later on this year. But we're looking at different ways in which education and technology can merge together to provide better educational options. So that is coming from us. So wait and see. But all I can say right now is stay curious, go online, don't be afraid to kind of play around with these AIs and see how it can benefit your personal practice right now.
Yes, I wanted to add a couple of things about this famous AI. Everybody's talking about AI. First of all, AIs need to be trained. And for AI to be a good tool for interpreters and for interpreter training, guess what? They need humans to train them to add to their knowledge so they can be a good companion. I don't believe that anytime soon we're going to have a Babelfish or we're going to have a C3PO. I believe we'll have them at one point in the progress of technology, but not now. Because right now AI is being trained on a lot of levels by humans. But it's a great tool to use to accompany you as an interpreter in the progress of your learning. And certainly AI is going to help us. I'm stealing a phrase that I learned very well, but I neglected to learn the name of the author. So if you're the author, please let us know your name. But I heard it some years ago in a conference, and the phrase is, interpreters are not going to be replaced by technology, but some interpreters might be replaced by interpreters who use technology. And that's where we are. We have to accept it as a tool. Realistically, technology, from the invention of maybe the wheel up, we've always used technology as a companion for our growth as a society. So it's not a matter of being afraid that, oh, I'm going to lose my job as an interpreter because, AI is going to do my job. Is leverage this technology so you can learn better, so you can practice. And we know gamification is an important part now of our learning systems. Schools, universities are using gamification at all levels, and we're going to use it as well as interpreters. So AI can help us increase our ability. And to be honest, the cost for some interpreters as a tool that can tell you certain things that AI knows that you should have said and you didn't. So it'll indicate those things, and it'll be a second pair of eyes or ears to your own checking of your work, because it's a big part of our system here at De La Mora, your own checking your own work. You can use AI that way, and we certainly will continue to grow with it ourselves and come up with new ways to help you, all interpreters, to increase their skill as interpreters in these fields. I'd be remiss if I don't talk about, just for a second, about the fact that in education, there's a big movement now for certification because schools obviously use a lot of bilingual teachers. And if you're the bilingual teacher, you kind of become de facto the bilingual interpreter, which, one thing has nothing to do with the other. But because of that, education is now kind of following the tracks that first legal, then medical created for them. And now there's a big movement and push to educate interpreters in education and to get to a credentialing level for them. So we're already in that field ourselves, and we are already connected with many potential students that will choose educational interpretation as their career.
How do you gather feedback from your students, and how do you use that feedback to improve your programs? Obviously, you're moving into education, so there must have been at some point some inquiries to the Institute regarding, well, how do I become an educational interpreter?
Well, there's one thing interpreters like to do is to talk. So there is various ways in which we gather feedback. Lots of surveys, surveyed left and right, all the time, constantly. And we gather actually a lot of excellent information from the surveys alone, but certainly from a lot of talking on the phone with them whenever they call us to tell us what their issue is. Through conferences, they come to our table and tell us exactly where they are in their careers and what's going on. So really just to talk through talking to them and making ourselves available and reminding everybody that we're here to listen to your concerns, because ultimately we're also here to create programs that actually serve you. So always don't be afraid to give us a call or send us an email, maybe even reply to this podcast and send us what your thoughts are about the future of interpretation. Since that's the hot topic at the moment, we'd love to hear your thoughts. We're always interested to hear where everyone is, what they're thinking, and how they would like to be supported next.
Now, you mentioned, Agustin, that certification in education is a kind of a new trend, but in general, how does the Institute ensure that the courses meet certification and industry standards?
Well, I'm going to use a couple of words that maybe are copyrighted, but constant contact. And it's not an advertising, but we're in constant contact with our students and with our end users, every stakeholder. We constantly talk to hospitals. We are now talking a lot to educational organizations and the courts. And as a matter of fact, this 100-hour program is a result of these conversations, because the first time when we started educating interpreters towards certification in the state of Florida, where I live, was, we'll give you a 14-hour orientation, you're good to go, right? And then they were surprised that, oh my God, but they didn't pass the test. Well, did we even talk about the test? Well, not really, but they're bilingual, right? So it went from 2 days orientations to maybe 2 days orientations and some skill building. And we went from 14 to 28 to 40 to 60. We're up to 100. And we have consulted with some educational institutions at a high-level institution after high school that now have plans of creating bachelor degrees and even hopefully one of these days postgraduate, right? But undergraduate, if I were able to do it today, interpretation would be an undergraduate degree. And 100 hours is getting us closer to that goal of offering enough education and training so the services that we provide for the end users, courts, hospitals, schools, is the best possible.
And actually, I would even go as far to say that this podcast is also part of that platforming that allows us to learn about what the trends are. So you're also part of that process, Maria.
Well, that leads me to my next question, which is how do you ensure, what measures are you taking to ensure that your training programs are accessible to a diverse range of students, especially if we know that one part of the equation, let's say, is English, and the other part of the equation is pick a language?
Lots of different ways. We're constantly, actually with the 100-hour program, it's an excellent example. We've had a lot of interesting inquiries already because it is a language specific program as well. The lectures themselves are fully in English, but all of the homework will be language specific. So what I've asked everybody to do is to please send us what their languages are with plenty of time. And I've already had, even though the 100-hour program has really been designed for spoken languages, I've already had ASL interpreters calling about it and asking, can you make this an ASL program somehow?
Yes.
And we're like, okay, let's figure it out. But the point is, we're always open. Our ears are always open. If you have a very specific request, don't be afraid to call and let us know because we want that accessibility for everybody. We want to make sure that everybody's walking away satisfied with the same level of training, you know, as let's say a Spanish interpreter would, since they tend to have the majority of training options. So we want to make sure to include everyone as much as possible. So I encourage everybody to give us a call and ask. I mean, at this point, we have worked, in the past 2 years, we've worked with about 68 different instructors, a lot of SMEs from a lot of different languages. So even if your test is in a couple of weeks and you need to meet with somebody to give you feedback and review where you are right now as an interpreter, regardless of your language, if it's a testing language, we can find somebody for you. So it's just about giving us a call, letting us know, regardless of how specialized you think the request might be. If it's interpreting if it's about interpreting, we can find the right person to help you.
Yes, I think we pioneered, I know we pioneered a kind of hybrid idea of education for interpreters with the state of California and the National Center for State Courts, where we have the core skill part of the training in English. So we call this a language neutral core training as far as skills, memory, note taking, understanding the process, the codes of professional conduct, etc. And then those same students divide into groups that are language specific. And we pair them with a certified interpreter in that field, in that language. So they can now apply what they learned technically as far as skills and use them specifically with their language pair. So then the expert in that field, in that language, can help them develop now vocabulary that is specific to what they're trying to do. And we've had very good results with that hybrid program because now we heard it a lot. You see, we do listen to our students and to our stakeholders because we hear, the Spanish speakers, they get a lot of training, but we don't get it in Vietnamese. Well, now we've had them in many other languages, Vietnamese, Korean, Arabic, and many other languages, because we understand, yes, that's true. But since we have a core that has to do with skills and not with language, then we do that together. And that brings a lot of very good communication among those students that might speak different language pairs, but they're all very interested in first finding what are their skills required to do the job.
And the 100-hour program will be set up exactly that way. Language specific homework and study groups and English lectures.
Now, to those people who are out there, and there are a number of interpreters who work and have been working for a long time, but have not, let's say, been brought into the fold. They have not yet seen the need and the benefit of becoming registered or certified or licensed in whatever state they are, because maybe they already get enough work, or they have some background that makes them feel that they have earned their stripes and is sufficient. What do you say to them who are reluctant to invest in this kind of training in these many hours? Why should they do something different than what they've already been doing?
I have something to say because I've had a lot of these specific students call us, and that have a lot of experience behind them, that had these very long careers. And a lot of the times my first question to them is, have you ever recorded yourself and listened to your own performance? And I don't think once, I'm telling you, I don't even think one time has one of these interpreters said yes. And these are interpreters with years and years behind them. There is more to learn. There is more to learn. And in fact, I will also be as bold to say that if they don't change their ways now, they're also on their way out. It's just simply not the future.
It is true. Institutions, court systems, hospitals, and now educational institutions are starting to realize that it is to their advantage to give a priority to credentialed interpreters. And by acquiring a credential, you will have an advantage over people who are not credentialed. Maybe you might still be hired every now and then, but you'll see the loss of opportunities when you are competing against credentialed interpreters. And you become, people who have no credentials or training whatsoever become maybe the second, third, or last resort. And if you really want to make a living or to supplement your income as an interpreter, then you're losing opportunities. It is changing. It's, in my opinion, inevitable. Whole hospital systems, for instance, now have their staff interpreters get credentialed or go. And we've seen the same in the legal field. You know, you get credentialed or you get substituted by somebody who is credentialed. I joked a little bit that maybe a couple of 100 years ago, you know, dentists were barbers. But now dentists have to go to school, to dentistry school, and they're not the barbers. You don't go to the barber shop anymore to get your teeth pulled. It used to be, but not anymore. So as we progress in this professionalization of an already existing profession and understanding it, I think what I would say is come to the fold. And if you are really that experienced and that good, then you should have no problem getting credentialed. I think that partially these people that have a lot of experience had a disadvantage because they had no feedback. Claudia said it, you know, promoting people recording themselves and listening to their performance was not promoted. And funny enough, many end users used to tell interpreters, oh, you did a great job. And if you ask just the doctor or the attorney or the judge or the teacher who said that to the interpreter, also you're bilingual, you understood what they were saying. Oh, no, I'm not bilingual, but they did a good job. And you go, how would they know? Right. And that kind of creates this false sense of security in bilingual people. Hey, you know, the doctor said I did a good job. The doctor that speaks Cambodian, no, he only speaks English, but he said I did a good job. So we know that as time goes by, I can tell you in Orlando, Florida, where I live, in the courts, the first request always goes to credentialed interpreters.
Yeah.
I am so excited about the 100-hour program. I'm excited because it has this wonderful skill core where it's all about explaining the different modes, and understanding what interpretation is about, and then expanding into practicing it.
Sure.
And I don't know that you can get that kind of depth. Well, I know that you cannot get that kind of depth in a 16-hour program that you might have for a state, a state orientation or something like that. That is just the beginning, the little taster to introduction.
Correct.
And having an opportunity to have real-time feedback from instructors who are credentialed and experienced is really, really, really quite a gift, I would say, to this profession. So thank you so much for creating it. Is there anything else you want to share about the coming year for the De la Mora Institute of Interpretation?
Actually, I would. This is, there's so much with the school. Please sign up, or going on with the school. Please sign up to our newsletter. Every week we send out updates and information about what is happening that month. But one thing that I would like to highlight is that we just posted on our website our next holiday party, which is happening in December. But I would like to highlight it because it's very inexpensive. We're only asking for $20 enrollment, and that includes a full day of training and dinner at the end of the night. And this is a fantastic way to end the year, to get some additional training, to meet peers. And it's already up on our site. We're proud of ourselves to have it up this early. But if you want to go ahead and reserve your spot, go for it. Last year, we had an excellent time. It was an entire workshop related to the business of being a freelancer and how to advance and sort of improving your business skills. So we plan on doing something very similar this year in terms of the workshops. And it's happening here in Orlando, Florida, in person. So a great opportunity to come and meet us, meet Agustin, and hear from our entire team. So it's just a fun thing that's already up on our site. But otherwise, please sign up to our newsletter.
Right. And I think we have memberships that are very affordable. Some of them are like $0. And by being a member of our community, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions and to get to know other interpreters. This is the goal. We need to continue the movement. We want to see more interpreters participate in their credentialing, and we want to be the beacon that you can follow to prosper in your career. So thank you very much for listening to us, and thank you, Maria, for giving us the opportunity to talk about all these subjects. And to everybody that is listening, please come and see us virtually. Or in person,
or in person.
Let us know.
This December.
And we'll meet you too. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you so much, Agustin. Thank you so much, Claudia, for joining us here on Subject to Interpretation. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. Take the time. I know that our viewers and our listeners can write to us here on the YouTube page, and they can also send comments to podcast@delamorainstitute.com, which is our email address. But they can also visit your booth at any of the major conferences and meetings, ATA, NAGIT, and so on and so forth. De la Mora Institute is pretty much everywhere, promoting good education for interpreters and giving us an opportunity to become better professionals every day. So thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
And to all of our viewers and listeners, never stop learning. We hope to have you again with us in our next episode of Subject to Interpretation. Take care.